I am an actuary.
I am an actuary.
I am an actuary.
Welcome to the We Are Actuaries podcast, where you'll meet leaders who use their actuarial powers to solve a range of problems and make a real difference. I am your host, Julia Lessing, and I'm a qualified actuary based in Australia. I help actuaries develop communication and leadership skills to build great actuarial careers. So settle in, learn from the best, and be inspired. What if the secret to high performance wasn't a smarter model or a better process, but the way you make your people feel? Joining us today is Jessica Lilley, a Senior Actuary at the National Disability Insurance Agency, or NDIA, as we refer to it. And she's one of the nominated leaders in our call for the Best Actuarial Leaders in 2026. Jess leads a team of actuaries, and she's spent years quietly building something that many leaders only talk about, a culture where people feel genuinely recognised and connected, while feeling safe enough to fail, learn and try again. Today, Jess is going to share the leadership lessons she's learned from the great leaders she's worked with, how she's built these lessons into the fabric of her own team's culture, and one unconventional communication experiment that changed the way her team connects for good. If you're leading a team right now, or aspiring to your first leadership role, or just curious about what great actuarial leadership looks like in 2026, this conversation is for you. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you on the podcast, and particularly around this topic of leadership. It's one of my favourites, Jess. And a big shout out to Leonie Simmons, who nominated you as one of the best actuarial leaders she's ever worked for, which is how we connected and started having this conversation. I mean, I know we connected, it's a small profession before, but sitting down with you and hearing some of your leadership lessons and philosophies and approaches, frankly, it made me want to work for you. So I'm really, really looking forward to hearing and unpacking some of your lessons and stories about leadership today.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. That's so kind of you.
Before we get into those leadership lessons, Jess, I'd like to ask you the question I ask all my guests, and it's this. Jess, how do you use your actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world?
Oh, I love that question. So, as you mentioned, I lead a team of 75 actuaries and analysts and specialist staff working at the NDIA, and together they produce high impact, thoughtful analysis and insights that are used by board and senior leaders and government and ultimately people with disability. And they are a fantastic team. I feel incredibly lucky to be part of that team and to lead that team. They are from a diverse range of backgrounds and skill sets, and it's something that I feel, yes, as you said, really passionate about, that I've been able to build a team that has a really strong culture and identity, where people feel valued and recognised. They feel like they're connected to a purpose, and they feel safe and supported. So I'm really excited to share some of those things with you today.
That purpose is so important, Jess, and that feeling of safe and supported. I guess it's interesting that you're working in that space where the National Disability Insurance Scheme, for those who aren't familiar, is a government scheme here in Australia to support people with permanent disability. And so I imagine that the teams that you attract the people that you attract to your team have that kind of sense of purpose and really wanting to make a difference in the world too. So how nice that you're able to also create that team culture where you can foster that and really nurture that for good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to talk about recognition, because I mean, recognition, it's something that can feel quite tokenistic sometimes, employee of the month kind of thing. But I know you've seen it done really well. Who first showed you what genuine recognition looks like, and how has that influenced the culture that you've built within your team?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, a lot of my whole leadership approach, I think, has been from things that I've observed really fantastic leaders that I've worked with do over their time. I've seen I've had the real privilege of working with a lot of really inspiring leaders. I think probably one that has had the most influence on my career is Sarah Johnson, who is, I'm sure many of your listeners would know, who is a incredible actuary, a former Actuary of the Year here in Australia, and a real pioneer in the social policy space. And I've had the privilege of working with Sarah for over 10 years, and she gave me my first leadership opportunities. She really has been
Ah,
a fantastic influence in my career, and one of the reasons why I've gone down the path that I have in working at the NDIA.
okay.
But yeah, in terms of recognition, she just had this way of weaving recognition into every day. Like, no, you every email received an acknowledgement and a thank you. She
Mm,
would, um, she would celebrate success as a team. She would include you where she could on emails to senior leaders, CCing you in, showing where your work was used,
mm,
um, and providing that kind of, yeah, giving acknowledgement, I think, to the contributions that you make. And
mm,
I found that incredibly motivating, very impactful to see where my work was being used.
mm,
And so when I had my first leadership opportunities, it felt like something that I wanted to be a really core pillar of my leadership approach. So yeah, we're very lucky at the NDIA. We have a formal recognition program.
mhm.
So in our team, we encourage people to submit formal recognition through that program, and then at our team meetings, we then um, every month we sort of make a big deal about celebrating who's been recognised. Those recognitions can come, from within the team or outside the team, which is wonderful. It's become a very creative part of our team meetings, very
Okay.
energizing part of our team meetings.
Yeah.
And so we certainly we certainly use the formal side as well. Part of that team meeting, we also recognize who has submitted the most recognitions. So trying to encourage,
Ah,
like, this is part of our culture. We say thank you and we acknowledge good work.
mm, mm,
But then the second part's the informal, that it's weaving it into every day. And as a leader, modeling that, every time I send an email, I'm calling out the people that have contributed to that. Where I can, I'm bringing them into the conversations. I'm showing them the impact of their work. And I think one of the best parts of that, though, is that it builds a reputation for my team in the agency, and it builds that trust, and people know that when they receive information from us, it's going to be good quality and useful. And I really think that's had a really positive impact on the reputation that my team has built over time.
That's a really interesting link, Jess, because sometimes I think recognition can just be seen as a fluffy, nice to have, make people feel good type thing. But
Mm.
the way you just described it, it actually has an impact on the quality of work, the reputation of the team, and
Yeah,
that has a whole ripple effect outside your team, outside your organisation, and also helping those people in your team to build their own reputations, personal reputations, and careers. So it's a
yeah,
really interesting perspective on recognition and why it shouldn't be tokenistic, but also how
yeah.
you've been able to develop that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when working with Sarah, that was one of the things that we would have as sort of a goal in, like, annual plan, which was,
Mm-hmm.
building my reputation in the agency, becoming a trusted advisor, being
Mm-hmm.
sought after. And I think by her bringing me into those conversations, and hopefully by me modeling that with my own team, I'm able to do that.
Yeah, well.
We'll be right back.
Julia Lessing's new book, Senior Leadership, An Essential Guide for Actuaries, covers advanced managerial strategies designed for more experienced leaders. It builds on the foundation of Julia's first book, Aspiring Actuarial Leaders. Together, these two books offer actuaries a complete leadership development pathway. The strength of this new guide lies in its practical strategies that actuarial leaders can implement to improve teamwork and organizational effectiveness. We're thrilled to collaborate with Julia again. She's an inspiration to actuaries everywhere.
I love that sort of daily recognition, and,
Mm.
and and it's not just, you do have that formal recognition as well, but you've integrated into your day-to-day work, and then rewarding people for recognizing others as well
Yeah,
helps to build that culture. Yeah,
yeah,
clever, really clever.
absolutely. Yeah. And look, my team, like, this is modeled throughout my whole team too. Everyone does it. I
Mm.
can I can point to emails from analysts up who, when they send something, they're acknowledging who has done the work
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and the quiet contributions too. Like I think that's really important.
Mm.
Sometimes, it's the people that are most visible, the people standing out in front of the team that, get that recognition. And it's really good that we are encouraging everyone to be seen and recognized.
Yeah, yeah. Especially for actuaries who
Yes.
may be more quiet
Yep.
and less center stage.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, okay. So you mentioned, on email recognition and, other sort of communication team meetings. I mean, I think more broadly, communication can really make or break a team. And you've talked about how communication has really supported that culture, that positive and
Mm.
constructive and effective culture.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think communication, especially through periods of change, is
Yes.
essential to make sure you've got that right.
Mm.
You were telling me about when your organisation restructured recently. You tried something a bit different to keep people connected. Can you tell us what that was and why it stuck around?
Yeah, absolutely. So my current team that I lead is the result of an organizational restructure. So 2.5 years ago, and at the time, it was bringing together a lot of people from different backgrounds and skill sets, people that hadn't worked together before,
Mm.
people that weren't necessarily familiar with me and my leadership as well.
Hmm.
And during that period of change and uncertainty, I was making beautiful PowerPoint presentations and writing lovely emails, trying to sort of get the information I wanted out there. But I also put in what I called a drop-in session each week in their calendar, and it was so via Teams because we are a geographically diverse team, but also in person if people were in the Sydney office.
Hmm.
And it was half an hour each week where people could, what I was hoping would, people would just come and ask me questions or tell me what was on their mind, how they were feeling about, the restructure and the plans that we had in place. And I didn't really know how well it would go. Honestly, I thought I thought I'll just put it in there and see how people respond. And at first, I got the odd person coming along. Then I got a lot of people coming along, not necessarily to ask questions, but to hear what other questions people were asking. Like they didn't want to miss out on information. And then we got to the point where almost the whole team was like logging in each week. And then I thought, I probably need to change this now to, put some messaging up front. So rather than waiting for people to ask, I need to sort of start with a couple of key points that I want to share,
Mm.
and then transition into any sort of Q&A.
Mm.
And so this is something now that past the restructure, we've continued that every week. So it is now just become part of like a core part of our team communication. It's evolved into more, chance for me to tell them what's happening in, within the agency, what are the key focus areas, what's
Mm.
happening in, the broader strategic environment, um, you know, admin updates, recognition. So being able to say, like in that forum, hey, this piece of work went to the board and they're really happy and they said X, Y, Z. So it's become this really wonderful central part of our work, of our communication, sorry, within our team. And then so I do like a few messages, chance for people to ask questions. And then at the end, I always say, look, I've got the half an hour blocked out. If anyone wants to talk to me one-on-one, send me a message and I'll give you a call.
Yeah.
And I think that works well for some people. Some people just want to be able to ask me one-on-one. They don't want to ask in a big group setting.
Mm.
And some weeks I might get 2 or 3 people messaging me and saying, can you give me a quick call? I've got a
Okay.
question. Sometimes I don't get anyone, but that time is there. It's
Yep.
blocked out every week. And it is, everyone knows that they have access to me at that point.
Mm.
And I
Well,
think it's,
sorry, you said you've got 75 staff. So
yeah, I do,
so,
yeah.
and you're all over the place. So this weekly drop-in session. So I mean, I'm sure lots of our listeners work in hybrid teams now in 2026.
Yes.
So what does that look like? You're in your office and you've got Teams running, and so people can dial in via Teams if they're not
Yeah, they
there in
just dial in
person, or
my
they can
team.
just come into your office and chat.
Yeah, we book out a meeting room if anyone's in the Sydney
Okay.
office with me, and then Yeah, which I have an agenda which I'll sort of go through and I'll put that up beforehand so people know what I'm talking about.
Mm.
We run a transcript so that if
Okay.
anyone misses it, they can go back
Oh,
and read
wow.
it.
Wow.
But it is very well attended, and I at the end of last year, I made a one-on-one sort of conversation with each person in the team just to check in, see how their year, what the highlights of their year were. And I did actually ask them about communication at that point, and I said, there's a lot of ways that you can receive information, especially in this day and age. We've got Teams channels, Teams messages, we've got emails, got the drop-in session, like what works for you and what isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that I spoke to said I could have less written communication, I could have less emails.
Mm-hmm.
I lose them in my inbox,
Mm-hmm.
but I want the drop-in session to stay. And I just thought that was such a lovely reflection of what that's turned into for our team. It's a real chance to connect each week and for them to see me, for me to see them, regardless of what people are working on or where they are in the country. We have that time each week.
Every week, every week. So interesting because, lots of leaders would say, oh, I don't have time to do something like that every week. But it sounds like that's a really good investment of your time that the payoff and the benefit to your team members is quite big.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an easier investment sometimes than
Yeah.
writing. You spend a lot of
Yeah.
time thinking about how I'm going to craft this message,
Yep.
what people might take from it. It's sometimes easier to just get in front of people and say, here are the things I want to tell you about. People
Yep.
ask questions, it becomes a conversation. So
Yeah.
I think it's worked out really well. And obviously I have to keep checking in around communication channels and making sure they're still appropriate at different stages of your team's development. But for now, that is something that's really working for us.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Weekly drop-in session, very powerful. And so that's different from a team meeting or a town hall type
Yeah, yeah.
session.
Yeah, we still have formal team meetings every month. We have, so my team has 4 portfolios and leaders within each of those portfolios who are absolutely amazing. Each portfolio takes on a formal role hosting a team meeting. So we still have those points of connections. The drop-in session is really more informal. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Very, very interesting strategy. A little bit unconventional, but I can see why it's stuck. And you've got the
Yeah.
feedback that it's been useful to the culture of your team, and your team members are finding that helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of culture,
Mhm.
one aspect of culture that can be tricky is creating an environment where people feel safe to fail or make a mistake.
Mhm.
When my kids were little, I always used to say if they fell off their bike, I'd be like, "That's okay. It's okay that you've fallen off because you're at the edge of your learning. It means you're growing. It means you're stretching and doing new things." It's different when you're in a childhood situation to when you're in the corporate world because it feels like sometimes the consequences of failing can be higher, particularly when we work in a highly regulated environment.
Yeah.
But so I'm curious, you've talked about how you've done this with your team. Can you tell us what does that look like in practice for your team, and how do you check whether it's actually working?
Yeah, oh, I love that description too of edge of learning. I think that's really wonderful. Look, safe to fail or a safe to fail environment, I think, is something I've seen done really well in my career and is such an important part of a high performing team. And I think, when I think about the things we've put in place in my team, there's things that I have benefited from in my career. And then there's probably the odd thing where I think this is how I would have wanted someone to have reacted.
Right.
And so you sort of learn from those experiences in almost 20 years of work. There are always a couple.
Mm-hmm.
But when we, in terms of the team, with I think about how we work together. So the first thing we did was when we became this current team that we're in is we got together and brainstormed like how do we work together? And I asked people to say, well, what are our agreed ways of working? We listen to each other. We celebrate in public and we provide constructive feedback in private. We're creating a safe and supportive environment. We assume the best of intentions of each other. So we come in from that perspective. And I think when you set that tone, that's sort of one of the fundamental building blocks of creating a safe to fail environment or a psychologically safe environment. The second thing is then how we respond to mistakes. And this is leadership down. So it starts with me, but it's how I would want anyone in the team to respond to mistakes. And I think you want to think about what that person needs in that moment when they come to tell you that they've made a mistake. It's not, um, it's that the first thing is that person, and the second thing is, well, okay, well, what do we do next? How do we problem solve? How do we, make changes? How do we learn from it going forward? And I think key there is ownership as leaders. Like that doesn't sit with the individual. We all make mistakes, and a mistake is often a failure of sort of multiple levels, and ultimately at me, like as the kind of the person that leads that team. So I never want anyone to feel like it's an individual problem. It's always something that we can work on. Also, I think sometimes as a leader, I can provide a bit of context around materiality. And I think, for actuaries, no one, particularly actuaries, I think we never like making mistakes. And but often, in the context of where it's been used or, what we do going forward, I can provide a little bit of context to that, this is okay, this happens, it's happened before, we can do X, Y, Z, and we'll put these guardrails in place next time, and we've learned from it, and that's it really. But then I think the third aspect, so it's how we work together, how we respond to mistakes, but then there's this like step further, which is how do you encourage people to try new things and innovate and make things more efficient and go out on a limb a bit? How do you encourage people to try and fail and let them know that that's okay? And so that in particular is something we're really working on as a team at the moment. And I think part of it comes back to you recognize the successes, but you also recognize the ones that didn't always work, but people were trying something new and were willing to put themselves out there. But in terms of monitoring how it's working, obviously as an actuary, I value having a sort of data set where I can kind of track whether we're making any progress. So we're lucky in the NDIA and within the broader Australian Public Service, we do have a yearly anonymous survey which looks at it's called an APS census, and it looks at sort of key aspects of employee engagement and well-being, and it's got great questions in there like, how did I feel when I made a mistake? Do I feel supported to try new and creative things? Does my organization recognize that failure is a key part of innovation? Like all these wonderful things that we can track. So my team now, having been together almost 3 years, we've actually seen some progress in some of those metrics, which is something I feel really proud of. And it's a work in progress, but you can start to see some of those investments pay off.
Yeah. How great to see the data proving those outcomes for the investments that you've put in place. So it's around creating an open culture of respect and being clear about how everyone works together, and that's sort of that foundation which you need to have in place to be able to do that, and then having that process around mistakes, because you're absolutely right. We are humans, we do make mistakes. We might like to think as actuaries we're perfect and everything is always right, but it's not true. But it can be really tricky. I remember the first time as a leader someone came to me with a mistake, and it was a mistake about it was a mistake in a spreadsheet, but it actually had some impacts on the ground. It was allocation of staff in different places, and you panic because you think, oh my gosh, what do we do here? But you're absolutely, I like your approach around person first, because that person could have not told you.
Absolutely.
They could have hidden the mistake. They could have not said anything, and maybe no one would be any the wiser, but the right outcome isn't necessarily being out there in place. So it does take courage for someone to admit a mistake, and then it takes courage, I think, from that leader to not, totally berate them about it.
Yeah, or throw them under the bus.
Absolutely, yeah. There's that accountability piece you're talking about. So, yeah. And the importance of getting that balance of having people innovating and learning and trying things, because not everything will work. And if we're only doing things that work, then we're probably not really testing the limits and growing. But we also don't want to give everyone a license to just go out there and tear the place
get the core work done.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. So, some great lessons today, Jess. You've shared all about recognition and how that can become a daily part of your culture, not just a formal process, and how you can integrate that and support people recognising each other as well, and the knock-on effect that has to people outside your team about the reputation of your team and the quality of your work as well. It's not just about making everyone feel good.
Mm. Yeah.
You've talked about the power of communication and how having a weekly drop-in session has been quite a powerful addition to your team communication and team dynamics and team satisfaction by the sounds of it. And you've also talked about how you can create that, not just a psychologically safe environment, but also a place where people can try and fail and feel safe to stretch and innovate without fear of something terrible happening. So I feel like there's so much more we could unpack today, Jess. So there's so many more things I'd like to ask you, but I think we might have to have another episode at some point. So we'll leave it with those three today. But to wrap up, I'd just like to hear from you, Jess. If you could narrow it down, what's your top tip for actuaries stepping into their leadership roles for the first time?
Okay. Oh yes, there's so many. I think probably the things that have worked really well for me in stepping into leadership roles have been investing up front in the foundational building blocks of your team. So what is your mission, your purpose, your values, the ways of working, so that everyone is sort of working towards the same goals. And then I think from there, you're leveraging the sort of specific talents and passions of people in your team to take your team furthest. And so one thing I've done is implement a champion network in my team. It's something that I did in a former team, which was a bit smaller. It was around 25, and it was sort of each of the senior leaders of that team were responsible for an aspect of our team culture or the way that we worked. And then with this current team, I expanded it and I actually made it sort of expressions of interest from anybody, in juniors, seniors. And what has happened is we've got these people that have put their hands up for a specific area: recognition, learning and development, innovation, knowledge sharing, all these, areas where they have a particular interest. And they have taken those areas and they have run with it. And they have, come up with creative ideas, and, they've built on my initial ideas, and they've delivered things well beyond what I could have done if I had sort of looked after that myself. And so I think the tip is to sort of, look beyond yourself and look at who you have in your team and leverage their passions and skill sets, because we're all working towards that greater purpose and that, those goals for our team. And I think the champion network is something that I'm most proud of, and I've seen a couple of other areas of the agency starting to adopt now, which is really, really wonderful.
Yeah, wow. So strong foundation, and then understanding strengths and really harnessing those strengths for the collective good of your team. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jess. It's been wonderful hearing your leadership lessons and reflections today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So there you have it. Real life stories and practical tips from a leader using their actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to get in touch, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your network. You'll find details from today's interview in the show notes below and on our website www.guardianactuarial.com.au. Until next time.
It's exciting to see Julia releasing 2 books in 2025. Her latest title, Senior Leadership, An Essential Guide for Actuaries, is designed for seasoned leaders who are further along in their careers. It builds on the foundation of her first book, Aspiring Actuarial Leaders, The Modern Manager's Toolkit, which supports new and emerging managers. Together, these 2 books now offer actuaries a complete leadership development pathway. As with Julia's first book, the strength of this new guide lies in its practical strategies, tools actuaries can apply to their work right away. It helps leaders feel more confident, grounded, and better prepared for the challenges they face. What sets Julia's approach and this book apart is how they weave together stories and experiences from a wide range of actuarial professionals. Senior Leadership, an essential guide for actuaries, equips leaders with tools to foster workplaces where teams can perform at their highest potential. We're thrilled to collaborate with Julia again. She's not only a joy to work with, but also an inspiration to actuaries everywhere.